Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin. My name is Chooks, and with me in the house today, exploring technological innovation in higher education, is Dr. Sandeep Shastri of Jagran Lakecity University. Good to have you on the call today, Dr. Sundeep. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Jagran Lakecity University.
Thanks, Jux, for giving me this opportunity to be with you all. Uh, I have been lucky to be part of the teaching, learning world for the last 4 decades. I started off as a faculty and researcher in 1982 and have worked at the university level, uh, teaching at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. And my research has all been in the area of survey based analysis of public opinion and on Indian politics and global politics. Currently, I am the Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lakecity University. This is a university in central India, one of the leading private universities in central India, which focuses on non STEM courses. Our focus is on liberal arts, law, management, commerce, journalism. These are the areas we focus on. I joined this university 10 months ago and earlier was based at a southern city of India called Bangalore, where I spent close to 4 decades of my professional career. So, as a, I would prefer to call myself as a teacher by passion, a researcher by choice, and a trainer by instinct, and above all, a lifelong learner.
Excellent. That's a very exciting way to introduce yourself. And thank you for giving us such an insightful background to your profession. My very first question, looking at the idea behind technological innovation in higher education, is just to get a sense of your definition. How do you describe and define technological innovation, particularly in the higher education context?
For me, technology today is an integral part of the higher education space. I think we cannot leverage the advantages of higher education without really bringing in technology in the various domains that it is required. But I'll add a caveat to that. I would say we need to understand that technology is a platform, technology is a tool, and technology is not the end product. The end product of higher education is learning. The end product of higher education is knowledge being transmitted across those involved in the higher education space. And what technology does is it provides us that platform, it provides us that method, it provides us that instrument to be able to transmit knowledge across the board. So for me, technology is a tool and technology is not an end in itself. I'm using technology because it helps me leverage knowledge sharing, it helps me develop learning paradigms, and it helps and facilitates a quicker transmission of information. But I must constantly and continuously remind myself that technology is a tool, and my goal is not promoting technology. My goal is promoting learning. So I often say this: connect to IT,
Yeah.
reconnect to HT, connect to information technology, reconnect to human technology, because human technology is about learning and knowledge sharing.
Excellent. I think I'm going to borrow that phrase from you after this.
No copyright from my side, don't worry.
Perfect. So, looking at the idea behind connecting to technology and also connecting to human technology, my next question is just around your assessment of how innovation would impact pedagogy, learning, and overall assessment practices. What's your opinion with regards to the impact technology is having in this space?
I think it ultimately depends upon human innovation to be able to use technology. See, at the end of the day, the dialogue is between the facilitator and the learner.
Mm.
At the end of the day, the dialogue is between the resource person and the learners. Technology is a medium that you use to be able to convey that. What do I mean by this? Many years ago at a university, when a colleague was discussing with me the assessment that her students had done for the class, it was very interesting what the students said at the end. The students said, wonderful classes by Microsoft PowerPoint, which means the students did not think that the faculty really did anything. What the faculty did was merely read out the points which the PowerPoint was telling them about. And the students felt, you could also sit down and we can all read it together. There is nothing that actually is being offered. So that's what I mean by human ingenuity. How do I, as a faculty, leverage technology for the purpose of learning? And that does not happen naturally or automatically. It is something that a faculty, that a resource person has to consciously try and put in. I often say this: don't make Dr. Google your competitor, make Dr. Google your assistant. Because when I talk in a class, students will Google and check whether what I said is right or not. So, Dr. Google is not your competitor. Why don't I ask my students in the class that I have discussed this? You do your own search on the net and find out more about this. See, can I make technology my assistant rather than worrying? And today, a lot of higher education space people are worried about this. That is technology going to be my competitor? Will technology replace me? Will I become redundant? My whole argument is in genuine higher education, a facilitator can never become redundant. The skill of the facilitator lies in being able to use technology for their advantage.
Mm. Great. I do like the way you framed that there. So I think understanding, I'll use the context of your, the example you gave with regards to, the academic with the PowerPoint and the students. Um, I would say, some will say that the academic there was trying to be innovative to maybe explore using Microsoft PowerPoint. Would you say that at this stage, in terms of, especially with the pandemic, that there's been innovation in how we use technology? And what would you say are the biggest challenges to technological innovation in higher education?
Let me start by saying I am also a great fan of PowerPoint. I also use PowerPoint, but I don't create an environment where my learners in my classroom feel, or the participants in my seminar feel, that we could as well do without the speaker and fully rely on PowerPoint and tell the speaker, why don't you email your PowerPoint to me? You see? Now, that is what should not happen. I go back to the point I made. Technology needs to be a tool which I, as a facilitator, use to be able to carry a dialogue forward. Today, we talk of multiple forms of learning or multiple ways of learning. Now, can technology provide a support to the learning by maybe showing it on the screen visually, maybe providing some audio also inputs for the presentation? But at the end of the day, the facilitator is the one who is leading the session. During the last 2 years, given the pandemic, in many countries, we have increasingly moved to online dialogue. Initially, there was a lot of skepticism as to whether the online dialogue can help or whether the online dialogue using technology can actually be effective as a means of learning. My own reading of the situation is once we adapt to technology, we can make online learning also extremely interactive. I have found that in the online learning method, there are a lot of learners who find online learning much more effective because they can do the learning at their pace, they can do the learning with their convenience. And as a facilitator, I have found It is possible in online learning to now have breakout rooms, to have discussions, to have group work happening. So there is a lot of learning that is happening as a result of a dialogue in the online session. But then what is required? As a faculty who is leading an online session, I have to do tremendous preparation before the session.
Mm.
See, in an offline session, a lot of things can be spontaneous. In an offline session, a lot of things can be on the spur of the moment. But in an online session, you can very rarely do anything on the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
You need to mentally prepare all that before the session. You need to convey that to your learners before the session. If you are going to do some group work, maybe before the session, you need to convey to them what needs to be done. So I think if a facilitator plans what she or he is wishing to do, I think the online mode can also be extremely engaging. And let me make one more point. What often happens is what we do offline, we automatically try to translate that online. Now, that cannot happen.
True.
Blended learning requires us to decide beforehand what are the themes that are better done offline, what are the themes that are better done online. And when I make that separation, when I supplement offline with online, and when I supplement online with offline, then I think the real benefit of learning comes to the learner.
So in a nutshell, what you're saying here is that a potential challenge is the idea that people want to just replicate what they're doing in the classroom directly in the online space and vice versa, and the idea that not thinking how to effectively use technology could also be a big challenge when it comes to innovation.
Sure. That's one of the efforts now happening everywhere. That can we look at our curriculum, can we look at our syllabi and fine tune our syllabi to decide in a blended mode which aspects of my syllabi would require an offline engagement and which aspects of my syllabi are best done on an online engagement. That is an effort that now many institutions are taking forward.
Right. So just piggybacking on the statement you made there with regards to some academics assuming that technology is going to take up their job, how can we begin to foster a culture where technology can inform how we do things in the online space, or even in learning and teaching generally?
I think one issue that is critical here is access. A second issue which is critical here is training.
Hmm.
And a third issue that is critical here is a dialogue. And let me spend a minute on each of these three. I think if I use a stronger word, technology can sometimes be very intimidating. What is happening is an entire segment of society is being left out in this process of being able to benefit from technology. So I think one of the factors which is creating a mental block in a lot of people with regard to the use of technology is the fact that access to technology is not uniform across the higher education space. So, are we creating new inequalities because of this? Are we creating new hierarchies because of this? Hierarchies and inequalities in terms of a new category of haves and have nots, in terms of access of people. Number two, as I said, effectively using technology requires people to be trained in the use of technology. Now, before this session, I was in a 1 hour session which involved a, a, a training of trainers where we were using two languages. Now, 25 minutes of our time got lost because people who were part of the process had not got effectively trained to be able to use that process. So I think to be able to leverage technology, the training of all stakeholders who are going to be leveraging this technology becomes extremely crucial and important. And third point, I think a dialogue sensitizing people to why and how we can use technology. Let me take an example. In the last 2 years, when I have been taking online classes, I have found a lot of my students would join the class but keep their video camera off. Now, initially, it was very disconcerting because it's not fun talking to black boxes as you go along. But then slowly I realized that there may be challenges which my students face in order to put their camera on. Uh, and then I devised ways by which I would suddenly shoot a question to my audience and ask a particular student to answer that question, which brought alive the point that your video may be off, but you are actively taking part in the session. And when my students realize that Professor Shastri may suddenly come to any of us to ask a question, even though their videos were off, they realize that does not allow them to roam around the space and do whatever they want. They need to be there listening to what is going on. And of course, you try to make it as interesting and interactive. So I think this dialogue and what I would call the sensitivity to what a online dialogue involves is important. So I would say I go back to the 3 points I made: access, training, and a dialogue towards sensitivity would be very important to make any form of use of technology more effective and more successful.
Excellent. So the three, I'm going to call them the three T's by Dr. Sandeep Shastri: access, training, and dialogue. And I think you do what I did enjoy about that, your response there is the idea of having a dialogue. I think most people don't understand how technology works. And even with training, there's still a lot of work that has to be done in that level of sensitization, like you put it, and to get people to adopt it. Um, I think that
And if I could just make one more point on that, a quick point. I think we need to understand that the younger generation is much more adept at using technology than the older generation. You very many times may have a situation where your students are more adept than you in the use of technology. You could very many times have a situation where younger faculty are more adept at than older faculty in using technology. So can we leverage those strengths? Does your 21st century classroom of dialogue require leveraging of strengths of all those who are present there? And it's not just a one-way traffic from a facilitator to the learners, but then learners also part of the process.
Yeah, getting rid of that didactic approach to learning where you're just spitting out things to the learners as opposed to having an engaging class. This is really interesting. My next question is regards to the fact that we have a lot of research with regards to how technology can inform learning and teaching. Um, I think piggybacking on what you called out there with regards to having a dialogue, how can we begin to implement research that shows how or the efficacy of teaching practices in school, and what does success look like after rollout?
I think I think this would require at every higher education institution or every educational institution uh, workshops involving faculty and students where I would start this way. Maybe the way to start it off is have what I would call champions in institutions, champions being faculty and students who are trained in the first round of this sensitization to how much and what all technology can do to benefit our learning process. And then these champions take it forward across their institution to everybody else. So I think I would talk about the need for a master training of the champions on what needs to be done or how they can leverage the capacities of technology for more effective learning. And then these champions take their master training lessons on to their peers, on to their colleagues, to others, and then that sensitivity spreads across people in the higher education space. I go back to my earlier point. I think a lot of people are afraid of technology. A lot of people feel that, I mean, that sense that technology is something that intimidates me. You see, yes, people feel intimidated by technology. And I think this sensitizing helps them to overcome this sense of intimidation.
Thanks for listening. This concludes part 1 of our conversation. Please join us again for part 2.